Freedom Broners Podcast number 2. You want to go over what we're going to talk about?
We'll go over. First, we have our special guest here, Gerald. Jerry,
please.
Jerry. He's been known to be a keen shot with the bow and arrow, and he has several white man scalps in his living room. So, we'll be careful not to offend him. He might take us out. So, today's topic, we're going to be talking primarily on immigration. Probably some feminism in there. We'll see where it takes us. So anyways, what does everybody think about the government shutdown? In terms of...
I don't appreciate it.
No?
No.
I think it's dumb. It's dumb that it's gone on this long. I mean, both sides are being really petty and childish on this. I mean, it's not the time to be petty and childish. I mean, there's people out of work, people not getting paid because you want to be petty and childish. And it's not... I mean, it's dumb, but I mean, it's not something that is unique to the current president, to the current Congress. It's something that's happened before. It's the tactic that's been used prior to get things pushed. But I just think it's dumb. I mean, figure out the budget. I mean, let's be honest, they're already spending trillions of dollars on the budget. It was another $5 billion for the wall, and you're going to shut down
the entire government over that?
You're going to screw over all these people working.
In my opinion, they can just stay shut down. Until we figure out a better, maybe they'll lose a whole bunch of their friggin' departments and stuff. Or their agencies, sorry. They lose a whole bunch of their agencies in the meantime. That'd be nice. But, yeah, I agree. It's pretty petty, and it's pretty dumb. I do think we need to have some kind of barrier at the border, not only for our protection from illegal immigration, but also to protect these people who are going on these huge treks thinking they're going to be able to get into the United States.
Oh yeah, I mean, the border wall in itself, of course it won't. People are like, oh, well, they'll build tunnels, that takes a lot of effort. That it's a deterrent, it's not an unstoppable, immovable wall that you're not going to get past. Obviously, there's going to be ways to get past it, but the point is to reduce the number of people getting past it and to deter people from trying to cross it, because right now it's too easy. I mean, it's too enticing to people looking for a better life that don't want to go through the proper channels to, want to make that trek that is, severely harming, people constantly coming through there. I mean, children, the women are giving their little daughters birth control and stuff when they take these treks to try to come across the border to try to keep them, from getting pregnant when they most likely get raped, because the people that are taking them across the border, they're not nice people, it's coyotes, it's cartel, it's, drug runners and stuff.
That is a major thing. Is that the coyotes, and why not take the money and put it into, or at least some money, and put it into the State Department so they can process more people.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see control of the labor force that comes over, because it does drive down wages.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there is some needed. There's some stuff that I've heard a lot about, the stuff like picking tomatoes that American citizens just won't do. It still needs done.
Well, and I would disagree with that. I would say that American citizens will do that work, especially you got like entry-level jobs or like picking stuff in the fields. Teenagers would love to be able to do that.
Right. We got.
The problem is that you have to pay a teenager minimum wage with these illegal immigrants, and these the people on the left will laud and applaud the minimum wage, raising the minimum wage, but then they have these other people, these illegal immigrants, who they're okay with it being below minimum
next
wage.
to nothing.
And that's I would argue that's why they get those jobs, is not because those are the jobs that nobody wants, but because those are the jobs that nobody's willing to pay people the full amount they are legally required to.
A livable wage, because then you can go back to Mexico and I worked with a guy that would come up here and work for 3 years, and he had a seaside house in Mexico that was apparently really nice. I've never been there, never seen pictures, but
yeah, that's.
Well, I mean,
come up here and work for very little and get back to Mexico and you live very well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how many of them are sending the money back to Mexico? So they're coming here. They're not paying taxes. They're not supporting the economy in any way, because money that they're making, a lot of them are sending back to Mexico, and it's being spent in Mexico. So it's a lose-lose for the United States. Illegal immigration. It's.
Well, if they're not paying taxes on it, then. But if they're paying tax, I've got a daughter in the Philippines, and I'd like to be able to send her money, but I can't. I'm too poor.
Yeah.
But if the taxes are paid on it, then it's...
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah, that's... and another thing that the border wall would address is a lot of these drugs being taken across the border. If you have a physical barrier there, then they are forced to use legal entries, and it's a lot harder to smuggle these drugs in. Which, my thoughts on the matter are that drugs should be legal, but then we don't want to be illegally importing them into the country if we're going to import them at all. And also I don't think you should take drugs. I just don't think that if you're a decent person, you're not going to take all these drugs anyways. So why does it need to be illegal? Why do you need to force your own morality onto other people?
That's revenue generation.
Yeah. Right now it all happens under the table in the shadows, where who knows what you could be getting.
Yeah.
And that's just I don't know the exact amount. It'd be interesting to know that, but
Well, the hard thing is they don't really have numbers on a lot of this stuff.
to come over the border.
Yeah, it's really hard to keep track of, what drugs are coming over the border and
Right.
But one thing I will say is interesting I saw the other day, it was a Border Patrol agent or something talking to Donald Trump about the number of people that they've apprehended coming over the border that are not citizens of Mexico. They're citizens of India, of like Pakistan and stuff like that. So there's people other than just Mexicans taking advantage of our southern border to come to the United States. I mean, when you start getting people from the Middle East coming over, I mean, that scares me a little bit. who are trying to come in, through improper channels through the Mexican border, trying to sneak in.
Keeping in mind, he is a kind of combat veteran who knows their culture of at least Afghanistan. So
small amount. But I'll tell you what, the interpreter we had over there, I kind of admired this guy because he he spent like the last 5 years or so trying to get his citizenship to the U.S. and he's been working as a United States interpreter. And he was telling us he screwed something up. I think he said he had a source of income when he didn't, when he first applied. And so now every time he applies, they just kind of throw it back. But he still keeps trying. He still keeps trying to come in the proper way. And I mean, I admire that, you know.
Yeah. Well, and
this
that's...
dude's in a much worse place than Mexico, I can tell you that much. And
that's what's
he's trying to
rough,
go about the proper way.
Is that we should be trying to... I do say we need to have a physical barrier, not only for its physicality, but for the symbolism that it stands for. The symbolic standing that we're no longer taking you in. We're only taking people who want to be American citizens and have that mentality where they, you know, if you want to be an American citizen, you should love America. You shouldn't love the country that you're coming from. That's where you live in a little shack next to the garbage heap. I mean, and that's where a huge problem comes in, is the cultural clashes. There are, like, we'll take Honduras, for example. I've been to Honduras. I won't say I'm an expert on Honduran culture, but my experience with them is that they are a people, they're very lazy. They don't show up to work on time. They don't show up to anything on time. They have a very, very sexual culture. And they are very, very thieving. They steal things. Like, this isn't, like, I'm not saying that all Hondurans are like that, but in Honduras, the culture is to take things from people who have more than you. That's just how it is.
Is it a communist country?
I don't think it's a communist country. They have a very corrupt government. If they had a little more, like, gumption, they would probably attempt a communist government, trying to overthrow the current government. But as it is, it's an extremely dangerous country. People, I think that San Pedro Sula, one of the major cities there, has one of the highest murder rates of any city in the world. I'll tell you just a story. I was over there for a mission trip, and there was this Honduran, and he was an atypical Honduran. He was big, and his Hondurans are typically pretty small people, but he was really big and pretty strong, and he had tattoos, which tattoos are illegal in Honduras.
Really?
Yeah, it's kind of like when I went over there, I had to tell them
your tattoos.
I had to declare my tattoos. I didn't have any at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had to declare. And so, but anyways, this guy Rohair was his name. He was this big dude, and he helped out with the mission trip. He would go and, get stuff, and he stayed with this, the lady who was organizing this mission trip stayed with him, with her. She basically saw him as a son, right? It was kind of a...
Lost me. Who's the woman? What's her function?
The woman she ran the mission trip.
Oh, okay.
Right, so like half of the year she would be over there, reaching out to people from the church, which was a church in Alaska. But she would run this, and she had this Honduran guy, Rohair, who was basically, she saw him as her son, kind of, in a way, and he helped out with stuff. He had an interesting story too. When he was a young man, the gangs in Honduras would go around to young males, and they would mark them when they were young with, it was, I believe, some lines right here, which is possibly linked to why tattoos are illegal. But they would tattoo lines on their hand and mark them, and they would come back later to pick them up to make them join the gang. Well, anyways, Rohair, when they came back to him and he was a teenager, he refused to join them. At the time, he was he was essentially raising his siblings, and he was trying to get an education and stuff. But this gang came to him, and when he refused to join them, they shot him several times, and left him for dead. He almost bled out, but he was found by another Honduran, and they got him fixed up and everything. But he had some wicked bullet scars.
Oh yeah,
across him from being shot. He hid in the dump, hid himself in garbage, and got fixed up. But anyways, hot dogs are done.
All right, you'll finish the story and then
Okay.
yeah.
we'll take a break.
Anyways, what happened was he would help out. Eventually, it was found out that he was stealing from the organizer of this mission trip. He was stealing.
One who had seen him as a son.
Yeah, the one who had seen him as a son. He had been stealing from her the entire time, so that he could. Eventually, what he did, they're pretty sure he faked his death. He was on a bus that was supposedly robbed and was shot and killed in the event. What happened is then they had a funeral for him, and this guy, like I said, this is where it's important that he was big, right? They had a little coffin for him. They were like, what did they do? Like, people were making weird jokes about it. They're like, what did they do? Chop off his legs so he could fit in the coffin? Everything. But they're pretty sure that he stole enough money from this mission to Honduras, stole enough money so that he could move to the United States. So he faked his death, moved to the United States, and then sent money back to his family so that he could bring them to the United States as well. That's just... So, even someone in that country who you treat with the utmost affection will screw you over. I mean, obviously this is anecdotal, so don't take it as evidence of anything. But I would say that's a pretty good representation of their culture. But we're going to take a break now and go eat some hot dogs.
This program is brought to you by AVP.
No way, man. The Association of Volleyball Professionals?
Not really.
They're sleek and sexy. They draw you in with false words and empty promises.
Tap, tap, tap.
Don't be seduced. The pleasure is temporary. Death is forever.
Well, we'll probably move on to what else have we got?
You were wanting to ask me about my experience with the feminism in West Virginia.
Yeah, we can do that. Tell us your story.
Well, it seems to me I've not argued with anyone about this other than myself, but it seemed to me back in the 80s, the West Virginia wanted to make itself a feminist state, a state of women, a state of females. They wanted to get the men out, sending child support back into the state, and just have women, because their hard currency would come from the men being forced out of the state to have a job, and then they would have to send money back into the states, into the state. And now, the major industry in West Virginia is heroin.
Yeah.
Opioids. So that's where that gets you.
Feminism brings heroin.
Well, it was just awful. There was a scramble. What happened was in the up until around, I don't know, the early years of the Reagan administration, West Virginia was a very prosperous state, coal mines and chemical factories, and there are a few other, some logging and this, that, and the other. Well, the coal mines got shut down overnight. Very strong unionization. And that's one of the problems. I'm very pro-labor, but not to the point where it chokes a business. I'm pro-business, but not to a point where it chokes labor, where it chokes the economy. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're in. We're in a predatory capitalist system right now. We're not in the only way any system works is if everyone is able to prosper. Everyone is able to have a say, and everyone's able to have, Anyhow, we're in a predatory capitalism right now, and I'd like to see it get back to where we're not predatory capitalists. We're just want to make money and make the economy flourish. You can't do that when only 3 people are making all the money. Anyhow, what happened was the state no longer was getting this massive amount of revenue from all these people. In the early 80s, dollar bills. You could go into a coal mine, you could be at entry level shoveling coal into the big bucket. When the machine misses, it chews up the wall, and it'll miss the rail car. Coal will get on the side, so you have to have people, very many, no brain whatsoever, $25 an hour in $1981. So the entry level, you made $25 an hour. The state was making a lot of tax revenue. Then all of a sudden the coal mines got shut down. Reagan shut the coal mines down because the coal is filthy. It's number 9. It's real dirty. It was causing acid rain in Canada. So when the coal mines shut down, within a couple of years, the chemical factories that were relying on the cheap fuel, you'd have across the road would be a coal mine, and here'd be a chemical factory, and you just took a conveyor belt and ran it right across. There wasn't any transportation cost involved. So these chemical factories moved, Germany, Japan, they moved out because it was no longer economically feasible to operate there, because there was no longer cheap fuel, and the labor was very expensive, was the union. So that left within maybe 2 years. All that left was the support industries like gas stations, restaurants, doctors' offices. So then there again, even without that revenue running around, businesses started dropping. You know, you should see pictures of Wheeling, West Virginia, which is the prostitute capital of the United States. Get the wheeling feeling. That's what that means.
We're taking a trip.
We're taking a trip to Wheeling. I think it's funny. I got people back home that don't really know what I got the wheeling feeling. Oh my God.
That's terrible.
Yeah, it is. It is. So the hooker capital of the United States, and it's not even a big city. It's like 30,000. Anyhow, they you can see a big difference. You look at pictures like the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and into the 80s. It looks like the shell of itself. Well, in West Virginia, when they maintained the laws that were probably put in effect in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, when a woman would not leave her husband, I mean, it really had to be bad.
Yeah.
So the laws reflected that, and they would punish the man. They were encouraging women they didn't have jobs anymore. They were encouraging the women to divorce their husbands, and it's a state sponsored, trying to get the women to leave their husbands and stay there. They wouldn't give anyone any assistance that was married to a man. Okay, what they would do, the law said that they would go 5 years over a man's income to determine how much child support he had to pay. 5 years. So these guys last year were making, starting wage at $25 an hour.
Yeah. In
1983. And I don't even know what that would be today. To making nothing. They're just about homeless.
Yeah.
Okay, so they would go back and we'll say, let's just say it's probably $100, okay, just because it's an easy figure. If they made $100, average $100 a year over that 5 year period, they would average it out. If they lost, they paid 75% of their income before taxes of that previous 5, which meant that
they're getting
5%. If you had a minimum wage job, you get to keep 5%. You'd leave living off of 5%.
Holy
and if
crap.
they won, they took 50% of that 5 years.
That's nuts.
So that was a get rich scheme in West Virginia for the women.
Yeah.
And that's one big reason why I'm out here. And the people, my own family, supported that kind of stuff because it was the patriotic thing to do. To bring revenue was, or go to jail, because the another legitimate revenue generating source in West Virginia is they have a federal penitentiary, and they used to have an insane asylum there. But they have 1 or 2 federal penitentiaries, and each not really a con. What do you call a person in prison? Prisoner. Each prisoner gets $50,000 a year. The state gets, and that's for the public system. $50,000 a year per inmate. And I have no idea what the private, because they have private prisons now, which I'm opposed to, because on any number of levels. I don't even know what they make. But they had just weird people back there. And yeah, you're either making really good money or you're selling drugs. And that's the only two way. You're either making $75,000 a year or you're on welfare and selling drugs. That's the only two ways. Yep.
It's interesting, yeah. That's crazy. I mean, trying to live off 100% of your income is hard enough as it is.
Right.
I went for years. And I was a naval cryptologist, interpreter at the National Security Agency. And I didn't want to live in D.C. at the end of the first Gulf War because it was a dirty place and the wrong people ruled the streets.
Yeah.
You talking about crime in Honduras? That sounds like Washington, D.C.
Wow.
So I moved, picked a spot on the map. Nebraska's a peaceful place.
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about, I didn't have to worry about my kids getting snatched up off the street. I didn't have to worry about, well, I did have to worry about it, but it wouldn't have been 100% that your kid comes home with a drug addiction or an STD at the age of 12 or something like that, which happens. It's par for the course in Washington, D.C., and I would never have been able to send the kids to a private school. I would be making in D.C. if I worked in a shop, a language shop, I'd probably be making about $500,000 a year right now. In D.C., I would need to be making $350,000 to $400,000 to maintain the standard of living that I have here, making $11 an hour, $19,000 a year, something like that. We're poor.
Jeez.
Yeah, the $500,000 a year is just like lower middle class in the D.C. area because of the cost of living. So I didn't want to stay there. So that's why I moved out here. It's people are generally level-headed. People aren't too freakishly far to the left, and they're not too freakishly far to the right. They're just somewhere in the middle. Whereas, on any of the coasts, you really got some weirdos on the left.
For sure.
We were talking about being forced to appreciate guys sticking rats up their asses. And it would, just almost illegal to say, that's wrong, I don't want to hear about it,
Yeah.
I don't want to hear about it.
Talk about it, don't tell me.
No, yeah.
Stop.
And I don't want to pay for it, when these guys go to the hospital.
Exactly. Yeah.
Everyone has their lifestyle. And as long as they keep it at home, that's fine.
Yeah.
But anyhow. Now, I talked about this too. I'm not real fond of Donald Trump. I wasn't fond of Obama. But I just thank God that Hillary Clinton is not a president of the United States. It would be illegal to be a man.
Yeah. I think we dodged it.
We did, but it was honestly, for me, it was the better of two evils.
Dodged a bullet, took a sandbag.
Yeah, dodged the bullet, took the sandbag.
Ow! I'm bruised, but at least I'm not dead.
You're bruised, but you're not dead.
Yeah.
I would say, of Trump, for the most part, he's done a decent job. I mean, I'm not that old.
Yeah.
But this has been the most involved in politics that I've ever been. But I feel like Trump, despite his personality and being an absolute he's a jerk. To be fair, it's mostly in self-defense against other jerks who are being jerkier.
Yeah,
but
he does honestly remind me. of a liberal with a conservative agenda, the way he acts. The way...
Well, I think that'd be a good way to describe him.
Yeah.
He started out as Democrat.
He started out as a Democrat.
Moved to Republican later.
Anyhow, you were saying, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
But you're fine. But anyways, what I was saying is that I feel like he's done more in office, at least in terms of flair. He's done more than someone like George Bush, W. Bush, for like getting stuff done. That's the only example I have. But
Yeah.
I don't remember.
It's not that it's my acid test is John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Everyone else pales by comparison, and I didn't like Nixon. Didn't like. Ford was okay, but he was only in office like 3 days or something. Reagan, didn't like Reagan. Who else was there? Didn't like first Bush, second Bush.
You didn't like Reagan.
Huh?
You didn't like Reagan?
No,
We've had this
really.
conversation
Yeah.
before where I say
We
I'm
didn't.
like, I do like Reagan, but
he did, you know, my approval rating of him is neutral. My approval rating of Nixon is just weirdo, you know, it's what Ford said, if you have to have an enemies list, you have way too many enemies if you have to write them down.
you should bring up
paranoid.
Well,
we
it
should
makes
talk more about Nixon, like your, what you're telling me about Nixon.
I was to say, it makes a difference living through those people and then looking back and
Yeah.
seeing kind of the cliff notes of what they've done, and
We-
it definitely makes a difference on your opinions of them.
He was the vice president, Ike Eisenhower, I think he was. And you see, he was gay and a conservative. And being a minority, any minority, the Democrat Party, they think they own you. They think they deserve to own you. This comes from the South. The Democrats are the party of the South, and they'll rally for you, but they really don't want you to feel independent. They don't want you to. They'll say we're behind you, but you're still scum.
Yeah.
They won't.
Yeah, he was vice president during Dwight D. Eisenhower.
So he was not openly gay, because you can be openly gay and being the president of the United States, but behind closed doors. So the Democrats picked on him relentlessly because they felt they owned him being a homosexual, a minority, and drove him nuts. And by the time he made it to the presidency, his brain was jelly, and that was what that was a lot of what the Watergate tapes were about, that they didn't want to release in the White House because he was talking about getting blowjobs in the Oval Office. That's sacrilegious. It's bad enough that who was it? Clinton actually got a blowjob, but it was from a woman. So anyhow, I forget where I was going with that, but
we got it.
You got
That's
it.
all that matters.
That's all
is
that
that
matters.
Richard Nixon is gay. Was gay.
Well, he was, and I really don't matter. I mean,
Can you grab me a beer? Yep. Grab me one of the. What do you got for that?
that he was just by the time he made it to the presidency, he was just, like I said, he had an enemies list, and was paranoid, and he's the guy that you ever heard of getting a pink slip? It means you're fired. Mm-hmm. He would fire people. The term "commie pinko." He would leave for his staff. He would fire them. He'd leave a pink slip on their desk that said "You're fired." So that's where that phrase all comes from.
Huh.
Reagan was. When was Reagan? Was he after Ford?
Let me look it up. I think.
I don't like Reagan because he didn't think about the repercussions of my home state when he shut down, 1/3 of the working forces. Shut it down. It's poisoning the atmosphere. But what are we going to do with those 333,000 people that are now out of work?
Yeah.
In a regional, some million people.
He came after Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy Carter.
No wait. Yeah.
Came after. It was
Jimmy Carter.
Came after Ford.
Let me see.
I mean, for me, anytime the government gets involved into business in any way, they always screw it up.
Oh, they do.
They always screw it up.
Gerald Ford.
Ford.
Before Jimmy Carter.
So it was Carter and then Reagan?
Yep.
Carter
so
was
Ford, Carter, Reagan.
Mm-hmm.
And then H.W. Bush.
Carter was a pansy when we really needed a hawk. Because I can thank him for being alive because I was in the Marine Corps at the time, and we had done what they call a NANZUS exercise, where they had the New Zealand, Australian, and American Army, and a few Marines practiced defending the continent of Australia. And they do stuff like they throw 1/4 pounds of TNT at you, far enough away to keep you from getting really hurt, but close enough to take shrapnel, take sticks. Anyhow, we were coming up. We got on a boat and went down to Hobart, and we're coming up on the western side of Australia, and there was a complete shutdown of communications. The Iranians had just taken over the American embassy in Tehran, and we were going to go do what's called establishing a beachhead, which basically you take whoever's available, and it was just 300 Marines in the whole freaking theater. We were actually the closest, the most mobile, and we were way over on the west side we were on the side of Australia to the United States. This is before we really had any presence in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. It was all still Asia and micro-Asia, Vietnam. Mm-hmm. Well, this was after Vietnam, but we were still... I know almost all of my training as an infantryman was jungle warfare and mountain warfare. But we turned left and stopped off at, this is no longer classified. It's been over 25 years. We stopped off at Papua New Guinea, Port Moresby. And, it's been like 3 days, and I'm like, we're already stopping for, take on more water and food. And so then we got off, came out of Port Moresby and headed toward was it the rising sun over this way? Toward Europe? Yeah, I think that was the setting sun. Sun sets in the west, rises in the east.
Rises in the east, sets in the west, yeah.
So we were coming up on the east side of Australia. So we started heading toward the setting sun, and they messed with our brains. Because, we were going to die. Marine Corps, you're a dead guy already. So we were no communications whatsoever. The only contact. We weren't allowed to use listen to radio, nothing like that. We weren't allowed to get news from home. We weren't allowed to communicate out. The only people from the outside world we had any contact with was our officers and NCOs, and they fucked with us. They were because why not? You're just
he knows.
But anyhow, I did notice that we started doing big circles out somewhere out in the ocean somewhere. And then all of a sudden, apparently, the Carter called off the dogs and he lifted the, because we could listen to the radio again and start sending letters home. But if you ever see a staff sergeant walking with a big stack in a hurry to get to the post office with a big stack of letters, and it's like insurance companies and, my lawyer. Oh, and we had to make out a will.
Yeah.
We had to make out a will. So, but that's why I'm not real fond of Carter as a president, but because he was a weak person, what would have happened was they would have thrown, with 300 Marines, they would have thrown us at this beachhead. And yet, Marines are bad and all that. 10-1 is what they tell you. So, but there were how many millions of these angry Muslims, and we were the only presence. So it was not a mission. It would have established a beachhead. There may be 3 guys left by the time that the rest of the Allied forces got together to come and land on that beach. But there may only be 3 guys there. Everybody else would be dead. So. And Reagan not only made a decision that he should have not done it so hastily. West Virginia was the only state of the Union that didn't carry Reagan when he was elected president. It's the only state that didn't carry him. So I think there was a little bit of retaliation there, but it left the state of West Virginia in the position it is now. There was no thought about what are we going to do with all of these people. What are we going to do with their livelihood when we shut these coal mines down and then the chemical factories shut down? What are these people going to do for a living? And there's still not the leadership in the state. No one is asking. And I don't care because they really treated me cruddy, so I'm kind of happy. I mean, they ran me out. This TV watching woman is now a big hero. But anyhow, and then there was the travesty of the Marine barracks in Beirut. He wouldn't let the Marines have rounds in a combat zone. Would not let the Marines have rounds in their weapons. And in a combat zone, put military personnel in a barracks. Even though we were there as peacekeepers, still an American. If you want to make the news, you kill an American. Particularly a Marine, soldier, sailor, airman. So this guy in a little pickup truck, laden with explosives, comes barreling around, and all that poor kid at PFC at the front gate could do was stand there at port arms and say to the truck, halt, 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 and throw rocks at it, maybe, I don't know. But it killed, I can't remember how many Marines.
Yeah, that was that big. It was a lot, yeah.
And under him, to protect because, as an NCO, you don't, in a combat zone, you don't house troops in a barracks. You do that in Germany, you do that, fly back home for, do it in the middle of a freaking combat zone.
Yeah.
But to protect the piss poor decision all the way up all the way down to the corporal level, lance corporal. Someone should have protested and said, no, make these guys go out and dig a hole in the ground because there's going to be a guy coming with a truck. We ain't got no rounds in our weapons. You know, why not? Why have, I think it was 280 guys, most of them Marines. There was a couple of Army guys and a couple of Navy corpsmen who are Marines anyway. Mm-hmm. And just blew the shit right out of them, you know.
Jeez.
So I did not appreciate Reagan protecting the rank structure all the way to everyone involved, from the commandant of the Marine Corps down to each freaking squad leader should have been just fried. I'm serious. Because you don't, those were unnecessary deaths. Mm-hmm. So I didn't like Reagan because of that. That's those two things. And everyone else has just been clowns. Obama was a crowd. I think Reagan, not Reagan, but I think Trump is, yeah, he's a jerk. But at least it's not Hillary Clinton. At least.
And at what point, like, where are we at in politics when we're saying, you know, at least it wasn't this person, you know? Like,
that's the wrong place. And we've talked about this. Okay, it is my generation that set us up there. Okay? It's your generation to You guys need to unscrew it. We did something along the line, you know. Someone handed me the keys to this country somewhere along the line, and I went partying. That's why we're all up.
Yeah.
I will take the blame. You can put that in your history books. Jerry Hinthorn's the guy that all the up, and we're going to blame him.
Write it in the Freedom Broners manuscript.
Yeah, do that.
Jerry Hinthorn.
Jerry Hinthorn. I'll take the blame for it. Someone has
enemy
to.
number one.
Somebody has to. But it's going to be.
Well,
I got
nobody else takes it.
Yeah, everyone else is passing the buck. Everyone else that's my age, they say you got, what do you call you guys, millennials?
Mm-hmm.
A bunch of pussies, a bunch of pansy. I don't think so.
Lazy.
I think you've been left with a world that my generation completely dropped the ball on. So I think what we're complaining about, you guys, is that you're reacting to it the best that you know how. As I tell you, my generation, we were left with these old World War II guys that, they say they were the greatest generation, and they had that pounded in their head. They thought that everyone owed them a living and didn't want anybody else, particularly young punks like me, participating in anything. So,
well, that's an interesting take too. To take, because that's what we've been told too, is that was the greatest generation.
Yeah,
these people who went and fought the Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how many of them were just like the rest of us.
They were just like the rest of us, but they had it pounded into their heads when they came home. You're the great. I remember that they wouldn't even talk to guys that went to Vietnam, that were in Vietnam. They just shunned them because they weren't fighting the Nazis or the Japanese. They were fighting the Vietnamese. We pissed on the Vietnamese in World War II. The ironic thing is that Ho Chi Minh is actually an American hero because he fought alongside the Americans to oust the Japanese from Vietnam during World War II. And then we left. We dropped the ball. Instead of staying around saying, how can we help you build your country? Which you guys may or may not agree with. But what that did was we left, and he had this devastated, the Japanese had come in. There was a war there.
Yeah.
And so the Ho Chi Minh came in and said, hey, buddy, let me help you. The Americans left you. So when the World War II ended, that's how come there's a North and a South Vietnam. They split it in the Allies, the Democratic side of the House, more Democratic side of the House took the capitalistic, the South Vietnam, and the communists took North Vietnam. And of course, the communists are aggressively not good people, not nice people. They wanted to, just like they did in North Korea, they wanted to retake South Korea, which was much more prosperous.
Yeah.
South Vietnam was much more prosperous, and the North Vietnamese, instead of learning from that, saying, "What are you guys doing now? That means you got cars and little buggies, and here we got people running around on billy goats." And, you know, instead of doing that, he said, "We're going to invade you." You know, it was the same thing with North Korea.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
So I think it's a great stopping point.
Okay. Well, thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thank you
Really
for coming.
appreciate
Yeah.
appreciate being here.
Yeah.
Look forward to working with you.